Welcome back to Beyond the Classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Harding, and today's episode is for every teacher who's ever whispered to themselves, there has to be more than this. My guest is Meredith Cooley, a former high school English teacher who spent 17 years in the classroom before making a bold pivot. After facing burnout and realizing she was ready for something new, Meredith carved out a brand new path as a freelance copywriter, working with education companies and now helping other teachers do the same. Her story is refreshingly honest, incredibly relatable, and full of practical insights, especially if you're considering entrepreneurship or exploring freelance work as your next chapter. We talk about what burnout really looked like, how she built her business while still teaching, and what it's been like to mentor other teachers through their own transitions. If you're feeling stuck or uncertain about what's next, this episode is packed with encouragement and tangible takeaways to help you start exploring what's possible. Let's dive in.
I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom, I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started.
All right, so let's jump in. Meredith, we're so excited to have you today on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so excited to be here.
And I love these stories. It's kind of like a two-part episode where we'll get to hear about your career transition into really, I guess, like entrepreneurship with a very specific area, and then also some guidance for teachers that might want to follow in your footsteps. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your history and education and your leap to what led you to trying something different.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually ended up kind of falling into teaching in a bit of a windy way. When I graduated college, what feels like 100 years ago at this point, I was an English major, and I came out knowing that I loved writing and I wanted to write in some way. And the reality at that time was that there really wasn't this world of online writing, so I kind of had to make some choices. I thought about trying to get into advertising, and I, applied for lots of jobs at advertising agencies. But I also wanted to live in New York City with all my friends, and that life just wasn't going to be supported by an entry-level ad copy job at the time, So I kind of tucked that dream away for a little while, which would it matters later in the story, but eventually I ended up going back to school and got a master's in education, secondary English education, and I started teaching. And for the large part of my 17-year teaching career, I was a middle school English teacher. I bopped around from, different location to different location. I taught in New York City and in DC, and I taught for a year internationally in Ecuador. And, I think the thing that runs, kind of the thread that runs through all of it is that I always had this feeling that I didn't think that teaching in a classroom in a school setting really felt like the right thing for me. There was always something, I loved different aspects of my job. I loved the relationship building part. I loved the reading and the writing part, and I was truly inspired by all of that. But there was always this part of me that was like, it doesn't quite feel like it's it. And that showed in the exhaustion that I felt constantly, getting to the end of the week, getting to the end of each day really, and just feeling like I didn't have anything left. And knowing, I really knew pretty early on, like, someday if I want to have a family, this is going to be really hard. How am I going to do this? And I ended up, as I think many people do, just kind of staying put because it was easy and familiar. And I didn't know how to change. I didn't know what steps to take or what I even really wanted to do otherwise, and I think that's one of those things is that teachers tend to, once you're teaching for long enough, you kind of feel pigeonholed. You kind of feel like, well, what else can I even do? This is all I know how to, this is what I've been doing for so long. And so it went for a while until I had my daughter in 2019, and then we had a global pandemic. And there were many obviously awful things about teaching through the pandemic, but there was this one little blessing, which was that I had a little window of time where the school that I taught at was closed and the school or daycare that my daughter went to was open. And so I was at home teaching from my home. And yes, I was sitting in front of my computer for 7 hours a day teaching. And that part was really hard. But I had these little windows of time before starting work and at the end and finishing work where I could do what I wanted to in my house. I could get things done. I could eat lunch like a normal human. I could use the bathroom whenever I wanted to. Like, it was just these things. It was like, it felt like a grown-up life. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to ask someone's permission or get someone to cover my classroom or, do these things that had seemed so normal. And all of a sudden really felt like, why? Why do I have to? So I think it was really kind of around that time. It was like the end of 2021. And I really just had these, the knowing that what I was doing wasn't the right fit for me anymore became very loud, and I couldn't ignore it anymore.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it. It became so loud that you could not listen to it. And thank you so much for opening up and sharing. And I'm very confident that almost every listener on this podcast is shaking their head saying, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. And sometimes just that validation that your feelings are normal and that you're not the only one going through it is so helpful. So thank you for opening up about that. Ironic or coincidentally, and my listeners know I love talking about my kids, but I had my first daughter in 2019 too. So we are we are sharing a motherhood journey together as well. Yeah. And I can say going through the pandemic with like a 1-year-old was interesting. Speaking of the pandemic, it definitely, I feel like for a lot of the teachers that we work with at the Academy, there's just something about the pandemic that was like very eye-opening for a lot of people, or a milestone just in education and teaching in general. So I think it's interesting. It kind of came up in your story as well. We see that trend throughout. So you had this loud noise. You were starting to realize, like, I can't ignore this anymore. What happened from there?
Yeah. I kind of started poking around. The thing that I did that I had never done before is I allowed myself to think, what if? What could be on the other side of this? And I think that for a really long time, I shut that down. I shut that thought down because I didn't believe that it was possible, or I thought it was too hard. And just allowing myself to kind of start thinking in little ways, what if there is something else? What if I can have a different feeling in my life on a day-to-day basis? And I started looking around. I started doing the thing that probably so many people have done, which is Googling, like, what else can teachers do? What jobs are out there that teachers can do? And I started, probably because social media algorithms are very intuitive, I started getting ads for things like copywriting courses, and instructional design and, curriculum design. And I really just started kind of doing some research into what was it that I wanted to do next. And, I also started to do my own writing, to kind of just open up my computer and write a little bit and see how it felt. And I remembered that I really love writing, that this was a thing that, I loved years and years and years ago, and that I still feel like I could do something with. So I kind of started with the fundamentals. I invested in a copywriting course and started going through it and started learning about some fundamentals. And, I didn't even know what copywriting was before that, really. And I started to believe that it was something I could do. So I think that in the process of learning new skills and remembering what that felt like and beginning to see the glimmer of something else, I just started to believe that it was possible. And I really, as you know, at that point, I had a full-time teaching job. I had a 2-year-old. So it really was pockets of time. It was finding pockets of time where I could be learning something new, where I could be practicing that skill, where I could be allowing myself enough time to think, because it takes that to think, like, how do I keep moving forward? How do I keep putting one step in front of the other with this and like keep moving forward? Um, and that's really what I did. Eventually I started, I opened up LinkedIn, which I hadn't touched in a decade, and started kind of looking around on there. I started finding people that I could talk to that were doing the work that I wanted to do, and who were so generous with their time to chat with me about it. I got some help with figuring out how can I use LinkedIn as a tool for possibly finding a client. Um, and then I started looking for who can who is going to be willing to take a chance on me to get paid to write something. you know, in the beginning, it really feels like this dual combination of, I know I can do this work, and also I know that I've been doing something else for 17 years. So how can I get someone on the phone, or how can I prove that I can do this? And it really did just kind of become getting that first client that was really random, and writing some blogs, and not getting paid very much for it, but like starting to build a portfolio and starting to prove to myself that I could do this work and get paid for it.
So I've heard that saying a few times now in this conversation. Like, you started by saying, I had to allow myself, like, what if, and then I didn't believe it was possible. I had to start allowing myself to believe it was possible, and then I started believing it was possible. And I think that mindset shift that you walked us through is just so common. And when teachers are at the beginning of it, I think you described it great. It's like you just don't believe that it could happen to you, or you don't know where to get started. And there's just so many layers to unpeel. And I wish the Academy was around when you were first starting this, because it's so funny. Everything that you're saying aligns exactly how we walk people through it, and things that are important, like the mindset, and, keep moving forward. We talk so much about momentum and not letting things stop. And LinkedIn, the importance of setting up your profile. And you didn't use this term, but like informational interviews, just connecting with people to learn about it. And kudos to you for like knowing to take those steps, or stumbling into those steps, and doing them, and laying the groundwork for what you did. So did you have some clients while you were still in the classroom? Were you kind of juggling both?
Oh yes, I was juggling both, especially so the 21-22 school year. I think I got my first client in maybe March of that school year, and I was, doing things in any little period of time that I could during planning periods. I was, in my car doing sales calls at lunch. So yeah, it was a lot of juggling in that first year. And I kind of knew by the end of that school year, I had started to build a little bit of income, and I knew that I could, or I believed that I could, go back part-time that next year and continue to build the business, and at least match that income halfway. And that's what I did. I was fortunate enough to be able to spend that, and that ended up being my last year in the classroom, but to spend that last year being, I'll say part-time. I don't really think any teaching job can ever be part-time, if I'm honest. But it did give me some extra time to be continuing to fulfill client work, to be continuing to build new clients. Over that summer of 2022 I invested in my first coach, and I kind of at that point realized, I think I want to take the new thing that I'm doing and build it on top of what I've been doing for all of these years, because I want to feel like I have this expertise. I want to feel like I can lean on what I've been doing for all of this time in order to walk in not feeling brand new. And so I kind of positioned myself as an education or EdTech content writer, copywriter, and it allowed me to, I think, show up with a little more confidence and to say, this is the work that I know and that I've been doing for so long, and I really know what teachers want and need because I am one, that's what I've been doing. And that whole first year, I was still doing it. I was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, writing for education clients and also still doing literacy support at the elementary level. So it was a journey. It was definitely, you know, uh, who knows what is the quote unquote easiest way to walk through this transition, but I learned a lot and it was hard. It was a challenge. But at the
So,
end,
are most of your clients in the ed tech industry,
they
education
are.
specific? Yeah.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And what type of writing, like you mentioned blogs, but for someone who
Mhm.
may not be familiar at all with this world, what other types of material do you write for these clients?
Yeah. So I started out doing blog posts, thought leadership blog posts, which really is looking at a topic in more depth and often with some research and something that has more of an opinion or an angle. And then I've also, one of the first things I started out doing were customer stories and case studies. And as someone that's just coming off of that classroom work, it's really nice because you actually get to connect with teachers and school leaders and district administrators and talk to them about the impact that, whichever company, whichever solution you're writing about, to talk about that impact that it's had on their students and on their teachers. And so that was another project that I still do a lot of that I really enjoy. And it's just really getting to highlight schools and teachers and students and be able to communicate the success that they're having. I've also worked on email campaigns, which are, sort of more short form copywriting. I've done a lot of social media content, LinkedIn writing and Facebook and Instagram post writing, um, landing page writing. I've kind of at this point done a lot of different projects, which is nice because it's really offered me the opportunity to see what do I really like and what do I not really like. I also fell into longer content like ebook writing and white paper writing.
Awesome.
I think that one of the things that I noticed off the bat was that coming from my background in teaching and in academia, having done a graduate degree, I felt really comfortable with the longer form kind of research writing and decided to capitalize on that first. So I sort of walked into all of the content writing and copywriting with that, like, let me try this first because I know I can do this. I've done it. And so I think, if that is somebody that's starting out, sometimes that can feel a little more comfortable because if you have done that sort of process, that it doesn't feel like as much of a leap.
So, when you find the clients and, you mentioned kind of cold calling, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, putting yourself out there, like, do they propose what they want you to do and how much they're willing to pay? Or do you have to come up with like your pricing, or how does that work?
Yeah, such great questions. In terms of prospecting, I had to get very comfortable very quickly with, reaching out to people and saying, this is who I am, this is what I do. And then I find that the clients that I've gotten from that sort of connecting on LinkedIn, they're usually responding when they have a project that they feel like you might be a good fit for. So one of the companies that I've now been working with for a few years ongoing, first reached out to me because they wanted me to write some customer stories. It was like a need that they had at that time. And then, after that, it kind of became like, oh, and also, can you work on some website copy? And then also, what do you think about doing this type of project? So I feel like most of the time, my experience has been that I'm getting, I'm connecting with people, and then if and when they have a need, it's a specific need at the time that often can lead to more work down the line, if that relationship goes well. And in terms of pricing, for me, that was, again, I think is a lot of mindset work comes into that. Um, and it was one of the things that I felt investing in a coach was very helpful for, because I didn't have any idea at first. I didn't have any idea what that pricing should look like. And one of the things I think about freelancing or contract work that can be hard for people is that not knowing, is having it be kind of a subjective thing. So one of the reasons that I love having networks of, a network of people that are doing the same work I am, is being able to talk to people and say like, hey, what do you charge for this type of work? Or what do you see out there? What does the market look like for this? And then really thinking through, have I done this specific type of project before? Yes or no? Is it really, in my background knowledge, is it really my perfect niche, which for me is, my background is in large part in literacy education. And so for me, that again was one of the reasons why I decided to do this work, was because I felt like with that expertise, it means I don't have to start at the beginning. It means this is this is the work that I do, so that it can help me to justify prices that might be a little bit higher than they would have otherwise.
Hey teachers, quick break in the podcast because I have something truly special for you. The Teacher Career Transition Summit is a free virtual event packed with expert advice, real success stories, and step-by-step guidance to help you explore new careers and land a job you love. It's happening on Saturday, June 14th. So if you're hearing this before then, go grab your free ticket. And if it's already passed, no worries. You can access the full replays or join a waitlist for the next one. Head on over to our website, teachercareertransitionacademy.com/summit to check out what's available now. And back to the podcast.
Okay, that's really great advice. And I really love that you leaned into a network of peers and hiring a coach and helping you get that off the ground. My next thought is, like, with where you are now and your time that you put towards your business, if you could give like a rough percentage, like how much time do you have to spend going out networking and trying to get clients versus how much of your time is actually doing the writing?
Yeah, another great question. I think it looks different at different times. I would say one of the things that I've learned that is, to me, one of the most important principles of having your own business is that you can't ever really stop marketing for yourself. It's one of those things that if you make it a habit, so for example, if you spend 30 minutes every day, in the morning on whatever task it is that makes sense for that day for quote unquote marketing or prospecting, then you are always kind of keeping yourself in that loop and keeping yourself connected to other people and keeping yourself top of mind for other people. Whether that's posting on LinkedIn, whether that's just continuing to nurture conversations through comments or through messages on LinkedIn, whether that's choosing to do that. I know a lot of people that use email for prospecting instead of LinkedIn. There are so many different ways to market for yourself, but I try to spend a little bit of time each day or a more concentrated time one day a week. And then I probably spend, I would say 4 hours a day on client work. Most days of the week.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, it's, and the thing is, and I laugh because I most definitely overestimated what I would be capable of in a day in terms of creative work. And again, it depends on the project, right? But I have found that when you are engaging in work that is very creative and requires a big bandwidth from you and some deep focus, there's only so much time out of the day that's realistic for that. I don't know anyone that can sit down and do 8 hours of writing every day. It just is very taxing on your mind. So I had to figure out that balance. I think that balance looks different for everyone. But what it does do is, as you're starting out and as you're getting a feel for that, you really can start to feel, okay, does this pricing make sense for me? Is this going to, be feasible for my life financially? You really start to figure out how to adjust all of those things pretty quickly.
And speaking of financially, would you say that you were able to replace your full teaching salary with what you're doing now?
Yes. I was able to do that in the first full year that I had my business.
Awesome. Well, congrats on that. I know that's
Yeah.
a huge milestone. So can you remind me and the audience, how long were you doing both jobs simultaneously before breaking off?
Yep. I began this work in terms of like researching and figuring out what I wanted to do in late 2021. And I walked out of my school for the last time at the beginning of June in 2023.
Awesome.
So it was like 18 months, I would say. And
Awesome.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I feel like one of the objections I hear a lot from teachers is this feeling of not knowing how to make a pivot and feeling like, well, either I blow up my whole life and just change everything, or I do nothing. And I think it can feel really tricky to find that in the middle. How do I begin to build, as you said, momentum with this work while still ensuring my own financial security, while still making sure that I'm not burning bridges, while not just walking out on a job that and a commitment that I made. I think that's, for most educators I know, that's really important, is to you have this feeling mid-year of like, oh, I don't think I can do this anymore. You're not walking in and quitting the next day. Most likely you're sticking it out another 6 months because you committed yourself to it and you care about the kids and you care about your colleagues. It really can be a tricky thing to leave teaching on a timeline that feels good for everyone. And I
Yeah.
think that's, one of those things that's really important to just say out loud and witness is like, you can build something else while doing that teaching work simultaneously. And yes, it's going to feel hard, because it is hard, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it and that you can't get yourself to a place where you will be ready to walk away.
Yeah, I think those are all, I mean, just so valid, all of those feelings. I think everyone kind of has that. Teaching is, I don't know, it's more than just a career. It definitely is like a heart job,
Mhm.
a very emotional job. And so leaving comes with a lot of emotion as well. And in your particular story, not you left teaching and you found this new career, but now you're actually kind of weaving teaching back into your career with teaching other teachers. So I know that you also have your classroom to copywriting course where you work with teachers, teaching them
I
how to do
do.
this.
Yeah.
So now you're teaching again, but can you tell us a little bit about this program and what it's like?
Yeah, I can. I'm really excited about it. I think early on in doing this work, early on in moving from teaching and beginning to do this copywriting work, I really quickly felt like, you know, I want so many women, specifically women, to know that like they don't have to stay stuck, they don't have to, it is possible to build something, even if it's slowly, even if it's step by step, to change the way that your life feels, you know? So I kind of knew early on that I wanted to do something in order to almost be the person I was looking for when I started that path, right? Um, One of the things that I think was a little bit harder for me is that I really was sort of looking in all different places to be able to find this, learn the skills that I needed to and keep moving forward. And it felt for sure like scattershot, like I'm getting this thing over here and this thing over here. And I really started to think about, like what if there was one place where once you realize, okay, this is the work that I want to do, that you could go and get it all in one place. And so that's how I started to build this. And it really is sort of an all-in-one, the work begins with that mindset work and sort of moving through, what is this going to feel like? Where is it going to feel hard? And how do I keep moving forward through that? And then doing some skill work in both content and copywriting. And I feel like that's offers options, offers, here's one way to do it, here's another way to do it. And sometimes they might overlap, and then we sort of end out the course with looking at how can I restructure my LinkedIn profile a little bit? How can I communicate what it is I would like to be doing with these new skills? And how can I use those to find my first client? So it's right now it's a 10 module course, and it has I'm not teaching it live, but it's a presentation, and then it's a group call every week. And the group calls have really just been this amazing place for the women to come together and talk about their experience, to ask questions, to kind of swap stories of like, here's how this is going for me, or this is what I was surprised about. And we have a Slack group where they can submit so that's the other part I didn't mention, is that as we're moving through the different skill work, the women inside the group are applying each of those skills, and they are actually building out portfolio pieces, so that by the end of the course, they're going to walk away with, I would say, 3 to 4 polished portfolio pieces that they can then go out and pitch with and look for their first clients with. And so part of our Slack group is that I am offering feedback on those pieces on a weekly basis.
That's amazing. I love the hand holding. And I think the portfolio in this career is obviously like so important. And I love that they're actually building that with oversight from someone who has truly been in their shoes. Absolutely amazing. Do you have a cohort coming up anytime soon? Do you run them once a year, a couple times a year?
Yeah, I'm actually wrapping up a cohort in the next 2 weeks, and then I will be getting ready to launch again, to re-enroll. I would say probably early December will be when all of that information will be going out via my newsletter.
Okay, great. And for our listeners, I'll definitely drop a link to the newsletter. Meredith, is that the best place to kind of get on the list to hear about when the cohort opens?
Yeah, that is definitely the best place. All of the information will be going out. My newsletter goes out weekly on Fridays, and it's really right now a place where I talk about everything from that idea of being stuck in change, and how do you kind of take those first steps forward, to why teachers make such great copywriters, and how they can start to think about their current skills as skills that are going to benefit them in another career, in becoming a copywriter.
So Meredith, I know that any teacher can become a copywriter, but I know my audience, and there's probably at least 1 or 2 people out there thinking, well, Meredith had a background in English and she was a writer, but I've only ever done teaching. What would you say to those folks?
I would say that copywriting, in particular, copywriting is a very skills and strategy-based conversational way of writing, and that if you can commit yourself to understanding the fundamentals, that I really do think that anyone can do that. And most especially if you know that, part of what my course really is teaching teachers how to write for education companies in particular, because I do think it offers such an edge. And I think that being so steeped in the experience and knowing deeply what teachers and administrators really need to have in their classrooms gives you such a great springboard to be able to speak to those pain points and to those needs. And so that, combined with the skill work and the strategy work and the practical application, the practicing of that, I think is a formula for success for any teacher that's really interested in that work.
Yeah, and I love that, because I feel like you mentioned, it's kind of the lowest hanging fruit as far as like their knowledge area. But then I feel like once a teacher gets comfortable getting, paid gigs and doing writing for ed tech companies, it's an easier jump to then open up to different industries. Now you have a larger portfolio. You don't have to work so hard to pitch yourself, maybe because you have some client names, you have references, you have hopefully some LinkedIn reviews people have left for you, and kind of branching out from there. Have you had non-ed tech clients yourself?
I have. I actually recently wrote for this is a both and type example, because I recently wrote for a tech company, a company that was not in education, but was looking to move into an education audience. And
Love that.
Being hired for that specific skill set was a really interesting sort of new window for me. I was like, oh, there are companies, specifically, I think tech companies, that will be looking for, what are the ways that they could serve a new audience, and one of those audiences being education.
Love that.
But, I think one of the things that I always think about that sits right next to education is work in like the parenting communities and industries, in the certain parts of healthcare and mental health communities.
Yep.
I think, even things like HR. I was very interested in HR for a while. And, if you're looking at HR tech, there are so many different ways to write about that really are more about the people side of all of it. And I think that when you go looking for that, what are the parts of education that feel more people first? And then you go looking at industries, and there is always a side of an industry that's really focusing on the people. I think there's a lot of different ways you can pivot there.
I love that. So to kind of wrap it up, Meredith, for some of our audience members, teachers who are maybe still back on like not allowing themselves to think, what if? Maybe not believing they can do it yet, what final advice would you have for them for just moving forward in some direction?
Yeah. I think the thing that ultimately really helped for me was to think of this idea of dreaming with the lid off, right? Which for me just means like, take away the limitations, because so many of them are arbitrary. So many of them are limiting beliefs, and sit down with a journal, or an open Google Doc, or nothing, or just sit down and close your eyes and think. and really, I think it at some point it does have to be a choice, right? It does have to be a choice you take to say, I'm going to let myself think about what my life could be like if I did something else, if I made a different choice. So I think as step one, that like, just give yourself 15 minutes to think about what something else might feel like. And I think that specific language of like, what would it feel like? What would it feel like for you to not have to wake up and get dressed and go to school? What would it feel like for you to actually at 8:30 in the morning be having a second cup of coffee in your quiet home? So like those really simple but really powerful envisioning exercises, I think can be like a push over that edge of, but I can't. And then I think just to choose one thing and do it every day, choose, look for a job. I love to tell people who are still teaching, make a list of all of the things you like about teaching. Why are you still there? Make a list of all of those things, and then put them in ChatGPT and ask, what else can I do? Like, with all of these skills and all of these strengths and the things that I like doing, what else is something that I can do? Because I think it can release you from some of those limiting beliefs that are so hard to get rid of.
Yeah, it's not easy. The mental side of this really is a big part of making a career transition, especially for a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Meredith,
really
thank you for being vulnerable with us today, sharing like a great bit of the emotional side of the journey, but also just the very practical advice. Thank you for kind of letting us see behind the curtain of how you got started on your business. Love hearing about the success you're having and how you're now helping other teachers achieve that same success and that same freedom, working for themselves, finding their own clients, and not just doing something they love, but building a life they love as well. So we're so thankful to have you on the show today, Meredith.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. I love talking about this stuff. As I said, I just know how possible it is for people to feel differently every day. And ultimately, that's what drives me in this part of my work.
Love that. Thanks, Meredith.
Another incredible episode with another amazing guest. Meredith, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty and heart. Your journey is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to make a change, and that with the right support, new beginnings are always possible. If Meredith's story resonated with you, be sure to check the show notes for her contact info and links to connect. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you left a review, shared it with a teacher friend, or let us know your thoughts in the comments. Every share helps us reach more educators who are ready for what's next. And remember, friends, the journey is just the beginning. Embrace the adventure.